Hi. Been a long time coming, hasn't it? 2 fucking years. My name is Brendan Reviews, and I welcome you, whoever you're watching this with, to 31 Days of Horror finale. Halloween is a hell of a mastercraft in suspense, atmosphere, and the everlasting fear of the franchise's central antagonist, a 6-year-old murderer named Michael Myers. When people say that they think the original Halloween is scary and creepy, most people wouldn't say it's from the mask or how graphic they think the film is, but rather the slow and somber tone that the movie persists with putting our characters through. They have to go through Halloween, a time where scares are commonplace, so it makes someone with a truly malicious intent that much more possible because they have an advantage by being able to hide their identity and keep it in the ordinary. I am someone that finds the original Halloween scary, not for its violence, not for the music, and not for the attachment I made to the characters, but rather the idea that Michael Myers is seen as the boogeyman and his presence looms over the movie like a bad devil standing on your shoulder. Michael Myers is explained by Dr. Loomis as pure evil.
To keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
And the movie supports that idea by making him this completely unstoppable killing machine even after being stabbed in the neck by a pin, stabbed in the chest by a kitchen knife, and shot 6 times ranging from the chest and head. Then to fall off of a balcony onto his back, he still manages to get away and never to be caught. The movie is something like a Pandora's box, as in once the seal to Michael Myers is broken, the evil is unstoppable and can't be reversed. The movie ends with all of the places our characters have interacted with as Michael's continuous and rough breathing looms over each frame of the scene, ending the movie with only one indiscernible fact that the movie rams into our heads. He is still out there, and there's nothing we can do to stop him. Michael Myers is the definition of the boogeyman, an unrelenting force of evil that never stops until it gets what it wants. Hence why we have a whole fucking franchise filled with 11 movies and 5 different branching timelines, because no one could agree on what the fuck to do with this dead horse of a brand. So then here comes Halloween 2, this one. Halloween 2 is a fairly similar movie to the first movie, and that is just that it takes place on the same night, has all the same characters, all the characters look the same and act the same. The only thing that's really different about it is a bigger budget, and Michael Myers dies at the end by a hospital explosion versus gunshot wounds and then all of a sudden mysteriously going away. Halloween 2 is a much more violent movie, much more bloody movie than the original, and that's because John Carpenter wanted to, give the movie more of a mass appeal to horror fans, so that way people would want to, go and see the movie more, so that way there's more gore. Because keep in mind, this movie came out right after Friday the 13th, where a lot of people, even though they didn't like that movie necessarily, they enjoyed it for the gore, they enjoyed it for the special effects, they enjoyed it for the violence. Halloween 2 comes along and kind of tries to do that while keeping in touch with the same feel. This movie, back to back with the original, feels the exact same, and even though it's a different director, John Carpenter is still heavily influenced in this movie. And I gotta say, Halloween 2 is an overall decent sequel. It's not the best, but it's definitely one of the better sequels in this series, and in my opinion, Halloween 2 is, it's your pretty decent slasher movie. Halloween 2 gets a 7 out of 10. The only reason why it's a 7 out of 10 is just because the violence kind of starts to take away from the creep factor. Now it's more or less like the subtlety of the horror is really minimal. So therefore, yeah. Anyways, moving on to Halloween 3. So anyways, this is a double feature, and this is Halloween 3, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. I already talked about this. I already talked about this movie with, I believe, Hereditary as two movies that I think a lot of people don't like, but I seem to be someone who absolutely loves these movies, or at least enjoys them greatly. I love Hereditary, but I do know a ton of people that don't really care for it. Whereas with me, I'm somebody that also just so happens to like Halloween 3, and not very many people seem to care about it. Because I already reviewed it, I'm going to keep this short, and that is just, it's about this guy who's trying to resurrect the sacrificial origins of Halloween by using these masks that kill children. And he's a witch and all that, and this doesn't have Michael Myers in it, and it's just about like people trying to take down that guy. It's an overall decent movie. It's got the same kind of good score that the first two movies have. It's not the Halloween theme, but it is a good synth score. I think that the biggest plus to this movie is Tom Atkins as the main character. His main character is at least very interesting. He's at first kind of like an asshole, but you grow to kind of like enjoy the guy just because like he's fighting against the greater evil here. Just because he's an asshole doesn't mean that he's the bad guy here. And overall, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is an underrated movie, and I think does not get enough credit where credit's due. Just because Michael Myers isn't in it doesn't mean that it's a bad movie, because there are thousands upon millions of other horror movies out there that just don't have Michael Myers in it, and well, let's just face it, some of those movies are good too without Michael Myers, so why can't this one be good? Anyways, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch does get a 7.5 out of 10. I do like this movie slightly, just a little bit more than Halloween 2, and that's just because it's something different. It's something different, and therefore I treat it as something different, and I don't see it as necessarily a Halloween movie. I see it as just, you know, another really good horror movie from the 80s. Moving right along, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, came out in 1988. Donald Pleasance along with Danielle Harris as a young Jamie Lloyd, who just so happens to be the daughter of Jamie Lee Curtis's character, Laurie, from the first two movies. This is a movie that continues off of the backlash of Halloween 3, so they brought back Michael Myers. And Michael Myers, after 10 years in a coma, somehow survived the hospital explosion along with Donald Pleasance, and the two of them clash heads when he breaks out of the hospital, steals his old costume back, and goes after Danielle Harris, the newest family member of Michael Myers. And just so happens that this movie, I think, is really good as a Michael Myers movie. I hold a very special place in my heart for this movie because, one, Michael Myers is an absolute beast in this movie. Despite how shitty his mask looks and despite how beefy he is an absolute beast in this movie. He is fucking terrifying. He's very versatile with his kills, like shoving a shotgun through a woman all the way through the fucking wall. I don't even get how the hell that can happen, but this movie has tons of good plus. First off, the opening to this movie is great. The second thing that I really like about this movie is the relationship between the two sisters of Danielle Harris and her older foster sister. I think that these two play off of each other really well, and they feel like an actual sister-like group, and I really, really, really like them. Another good plus is Donald Pleasance is also really good in this movie. I like the gore, I like the violence in this movie. I just overall like the flow of this movie. This movie is very fast-paced, and they took it seriously because it was the 10-year anniversary of the original. And I do think that Halloween 4 is, at times, very underlooked, underrated movie, even if it is kind of more of the same. I think Halloween 4 with The Return of Michael Myers is a good slasher movie, and up to this point is the best sequel in the Halloween series. So therefore, I'm going to go ahead and give Halloween, The Return of Michael Myers, a 8 out of 10. The reason why an 8 out of 10 is I do have one problem with this movie, and that is the ending. The ending to this movie has Michael Myers die, and then Jamie all of a sudden adopts her uncle's way, and that is she kills her stepmom. And in my opinion, they should have followed up on this ending. But now let's talk about the fucking shit show that is Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, was rushed into production and thrown right back into the theaters 1 year later after Halloween 4. This movie sucks. First off, Danielle Harris is now a mute throughout most of the damn movie. Michael Myers looks more like a fucking alien, and Michael Myers is back because nobody liked the idea of a child killer, even though that's how the first movie played out. Michael Myers is back now and kills the foster sister right away, and she gets replaced by one of the most annoying characters left in this franchise. And gosh damn, this movie has so much wrong with it. Donald Pleasance in this movie isn't even good. Donald Pleasance he's off the fucking charts, over the top and insane in this movie. He's literally grabbing Jamie, like getting all up in her face saying like, help me find Michael. And it's just, this movie was bad. This movie was rushed into production. The writing is off the charts terrible, and we have some really terrible comedic reliefs in this movie, and that is of course like the characters that replace the older stepsister. And then these fucking cops. The fucking cops in this movie are fucking terrible. Overall, this movie's fucking atrocious, and Michael Myers is defeated by getting like tranquilizer darts into him, and then is beaten with a plank of wood, and then gets broken out by this guy, this man in black, who is in the movie for like 3 shots before he finally breaks out Michael Myers. This movie fucking sucks. Halloween 5 is an all-around fucking terrible movie, and nothing about it, in my opinion, is really redeeming, and therefore Halloween 5, The Return of Michael Myers, gets a fucking 3 out of 10. Well, at least the next one isn't terrible by this level, but I gotta talk about the next movie. So Halloween 6 is a very like interesting movie because there are 2 cuts to this movie. There's the theatrical cut, and then there's the producer's cut. We're gonna talk about the producer's cut first because this is the original movie before it was cut down and changed the ending for the theatrical cut. The producer's cut, in my opinion, is way better than the theatrical cut for the most part, or explains a lot of the mythology behind Michael Myers, and even if it is convoluted and the idea of the cult is fucking retarded at times, at least they went full force with it in this. I don't like the half-cocked idea that they went with in the theatrical version where they didn't explain anything, and so therefore I can respect this by going full force into the idea of the cult. I think the music in this is good. They made a hard emphasis on trying to be more like the original, with the gore very minimal at times, and the score being pulse pounding, and there being a lot of like stalking scenes. And therefore, I can respect this movie a lot more. There are some legitimately good moments in this movie where I'm like, yeah, you know, I actually like think that this movie's a little bit more creepy than the rest of them. In terms of like Halloween movies, this is not necessarily one of the better ones, but it is still enjoyable at times. I think the producer's cut is better than the theatrical cut for a few reasons, and that's just mainly because this movie makes a lot more sense. I will be honest, the idea of stopping Michael Myers with fucking stones on the floor is absolutely retarded. And Donald Pleasance died shortly after this movie, like, wrapped up production. So therefore, why would they ever think that the cliffhanger left by this movie, where Donald Pleasance now becomes the caretaker to Michael Myers, who was originally Dr. Wynn, a very small, minimal role from the first movie, why the hell did they ever think that was going to work, especially if Donald Pleasance died right after the movie finished? This movie is creepy at times and has some legitimately good moments. Paul Rudd, believe it or not, is the main character. He plays Tommy Doyle from the first movie, who was the kid that Jamie Lee Curtis babysat. And I think this movie is overall rather decent, but there are some huge flaws in this movie, especially considering Michael Myers himself raped his niece. Jamie in this movie is now a teenager and has a baby, and it's implied later in the movie that Michael Myers, who's trying to kill off all of his family members due to the curse of the thorn, raped his niece and fathered a child just so that way he can kill the child again. That's fucking stupid, and I hate that plotline, and they keep that fucking plotline in the theatrical cut, I believe. Anyways, Halloween 6, the producer's cut, is a mixed bag for sure. So I'm just gonna go ahead and give Halloween 6, the producer's cut, a 5 out of 10. Now let's talk about the clusterfuck that is the theatrical cut. So Jamie no longer dies towards the ending of the second act. She dies within the first fucking act of this movie, and the baby is now with Paul Rudd throughout the rest of the movie. The editing in this movie is also fucking terrible. It's super fast and flashy, which does not work for this kind of movie. It's also very rock, the score is very rock heavy and has a ton of guitars and whatever. I mean, though it can work for a different horror movie, it doesn't work for this one. The last act is completely changed. It's no longer about the cult and trying to just stop Michael Myers using the anti-spell of the Curse of the Thorn. It's now go there and they find like all these fetuses that the cult have been like holding, and like they find test subjects for shit. Michael Myers gets beaten down with a lead pipe by Paul Rudd, and Michael Myers is dead. And then at the end of the movie, Donald Pleasence comes out, says, "I have some business to attend to," and then he screams off screen, where we see Michael Myers' mask with a syringe next to it, implying that Michael Myers is still alive and he just killed Dr. Loomis. That's what I don't fucking get about this movie. Why did it take him 17 years to finally kill Dr. Loomis? And why did they think this was okay? Beating Michael Myers to death with a lead pipe as your definitive way of killing your villain? That's fucking stupid. It is beyond fucking stupid. I have no idea why the hell they were thinking that. Whatever. Fuck this movie. I hate the flashy editing. I don't like how gory the movie is, because now it just is pointless. The plot doesn't make any sense. There are dozens of plot holes because it is not the producer's cut. I just think this movie is a mess all around, despite some of the decent like stuff towards the end with some of the kills, but even then, I can't do it. This movie is worse than I'd say probably most of them besides Halloween 5. Anyways, Halloween 6, the theatrical cut, gets a 4 out of 10.
Well, that ended stupidly, and I never thought that people would agree on that same fact, but with the death of Donald Pleasence and the fact that fans hated the idea of the cult, what the hell could be done? Well, how about reboot the franchise with Jamie Lee Curtis, of course? This makes what I would say is the most bland and forgettable branch in the Halloween cinematic multiverse. Jesus Christ, did I just fucking say that?
Halloween H2O is a sequel to Halloween 1 and 2 only, and completely ignores 3, 4, 5, and 6, which means that this is a rebooted franchise now. And I think that this movie has a lot of potential because it's Jamie Lee Curtis back and she is fighting Michael Myers once again. And I like this idea, but I think the execution is rather poor. I think Michael Myers in this movie is very bland, very uninteresting. His look is really bad too, just like Halloween's 4 and 5. His mask is fucking terrible, and his mask gets so fucking bad to a point that his mask is CGI'd on. I have no idea who the fuck thought that was okay, but it's not. It looks fucking terrible every time I see it, and I can't stand to look at it. Not to mention, most of the kills in this movie are really bad. The only really reason why I actually watch this movie is mainly for the relationship between Josh Hartnett and Jamie Lee Curtis. The two of them play off each other rather well, and I can buy into the idea of them being mother and son. But I hate the idea of this movie taking place on a university campus. It just doesn't feel as claustrophobic, and maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point of the movie is that it's supposed to be Laurie Strode taking over control and fighting Michael, but I don't think a lot of this movie works because of that. I think this movie is rather bland, and it honestly falls into the 90s. It falls into like the 90s era of horror where a lot of it's very bland, niche, and just doesn't matter. This movie tried to be meta thanks to Scream coming out at the time, and I think this movie's bland. I don't really care for it. Halloween H2O gets a 5 out of 10. Halloween Resurrection is a fucking terrible movie and gets a 0 out of 10.
What in the fuck? How did we go from a cult to a, half-decent revival, I think, to a fucking Blair Witch capitalizing web series of a slasher movie? Resurrection is widely considered to be the worst in the entire series, and that's saying a lot. So the franchise lay dormant for half a decade until August of 2007, when Rob Zombie released his polarizing remake of the beloved original tale of the Boogeyman.
I don't like the fact that the movie plays off the idea that Michael Myers is who he is because of all the trauma he's faced in his life, and how his mother was a stripper, his dad was abusive, his sister was a whore, and just that nobody took care of him, and he was just a loner. He was bullied all the time, and I don't like the fact that we really got that much detail into his life. I kind of like the idea that he was just born purely evil, hence why the blank expression of the kid at the beginning of the first Halloween is so much more scary than any of the stuff in this. I think this movie is interesting. I don't think it's bad. I like the first 45 minutes, even though I do have problems with it. That is, of course, I think they show too much. But I do like the idea that we get to see kind of more of Michael Myers leading up into becoming what he is. And I liked how we saw a lot of him in the hospital, where he finally breaks out, he kills the guards, he kills some of the janitors that are trying to rape one of the inmates in the director's cut. And I think that Michael Myers in this movie is the most brutal Michael Myers yet. He is absolutely fucking insane. It also helps that he's like played by a dude who's like 6'8" in real life. This guy is jacked, and Michael Myers in this movie is absolutely insane, and he goes after his sister, and I think from there on out, the movie has some really good plus sides. I really like Laurie's parents in this movie, played by Dee Wallace, and I can't remember the dad, but Dee Wallace in this plays a really good mama figure, and I think that Brad Dourif as the sheriff in this is really good. Daniel Harris from Halloween's 4 and 5 makes an appearance in this as Laurie's best friend, who survives an absolutely brutal attack from Michael Myers. And I think that this movie is overall rather decent. It has some really good moments of suspense, but there are a few moments in this movie that don't work for me, especially all the times Love Hurts comes on. But I do think that this movie is overall very entertaining, if not albeit different, remake to the classic original. Whereas the original is all about the suspense and slowness and the subtlety of the horror, this is all about the in-your-face, like brutal fact truth that can maybe spawn into creating a horror movie icon, creating a killer. So basically, nature versus nurture. That's the difference between the original and the remake. I think the Halloween remake is an overall decent movie, and I'm going to go ahead and give the Halloween remake from 2007 a 6 out of 10. Moving on to Halloween 2. This movie single-handedly killed the franchise for most people, hence why we got the reboot in 2018. But I'm very different as you guys can see, my opinions aren't necessarily the same as everybody else's. And I actually do quite like Halloween 2. I got this DVD from my girlfriend, so thank you, by the way. Moving on to Halloween 2, the remake. I like a lot about this movie. I like the style more than anything, and I like how Rob Zombie had full control and really went into the whole artsy feel with Michael Myers. I actually think that his style, though definitely polarizing and jarring, I think it's interesting as hell to think about, like, what is going inside the guy's head or he's seeing. And I love that about this movie. I also love how brutal it is and how it really taps into the idea of how people deal with post-traumatic stress disorder and how people deal with the events of the first movie. Now we have Laurie living with her best friend and living with Brad Dourif's sheriff character, and it's insane to see how much Laurie has changed from the first movie to this movie. She goes from being this really sweet girl to being somebody who absolutely fucking hates the world and is retaliating against everybody. And I think that this is a great character study movie, more so than anything else. I like how this movie has the balls to go all the way out there. The only thing I really don't like about this movie, and it kills this movie big time for me, is Malcolm McDowell's Dr. Loomis. He is an absolute fucking asshole in this movie, more selfish and more mean than anything else I think I've ever seen from Rob Zombie. And that's saying a lot considering we have a whole trilogy of the fucking Firefly family, and it's ridiculous. I think Malcolm McDowell in this movie is an absolute asshole, and every time I watch this movie, I get mad watching it, and I guess that's a testament to the filmmaking. So good acting on his part, because I think he was supposed to be an asshole until the end when he finally redeems himself and tries to save Laurie from Michael Myers and surprisingly dies. The biggest thing about this movie, though, that surprised me was that Michael Myers fucking speaks. Yeah, you heard me. Michael Myers actually fucking speaks. But it says one word, and it's kind of stupid. He just says, die. I like this movie for the most part. I just don't like Malcolm McDowell. I don't like the fact that he speaks at the end. And just some different moments in here, especially with all the killing of like naked strippers and naked women. I just am like, it's gratuitous. I don't really care to watch it. Outside of that, though, I think this movie is okay. It's not bad. It's not good. But I think it's overall okay. I think that Halloween 2, the remake, is a polarizing movie to say the least, but I think it's okay. It's definitely worth a watch. I think Halloween 2 gets a 5 out of 10.
Do I have to say it again? Another fuck up. At this point, the franchise was deader than Michael Myers had ever been in any of these movies, and the producers knew it. After a long, long time, Halloween and the character of Michael Myers were sold to Blumhouse Pictures, where the announcement of a reboot was short on the way. It all culminated when in 2018, the reboot of the franchise was brought to theaters named Halloween... Wait, what? It's just called Halloween? And it's only a sequel to the first one, ignoring everyone from Halloween 2 and onward? Okay. So let me get this straight. We now have 5 branching timelines. We have the timeline of the originals, Halloween 1, 2, and 4 through 6. We will call this the Strode timeline. Now we have Halloween 3, where the Halloween movie is just that, a movie. This timeline will be called Season of the Witch. Then there's the H2O timeline, where the chronology is the first, second, H2O, and Halloween Resurrection. Now we have the Rob Zombie timeline, where they are plainly called Halloween 1 and 2. Thank fuck for that. And finally, we have the rebooted timeline, where the timeline is the original, followed by the duplicate titled sequel, followed by the upcoming Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. With all those timelines, there are 3 movies called Halloween, where 2 of them are in the same universe. And then there are 2 Halloween 2s and 2 rebooted franchises, with Halloween H2O being the first timeline to be a reboot franchise. Not to mention the producer's cuts and the theatrical cuts of Halloween 6. Dear God, fuck this timeline. Oh my gosh, all these fucking movies. It's getting hard to keep track of, but whatever. Now that we got that out of the way, as the 11th movie in this franchise, how does this new one from 2018 hold up when compared to the rest?
Oh fuck yes, I've been waiting to talk about this movie. Halloween 2018 is my favorite movie. If not in the whole franchise, it's my favorite since the original. And it's because this movie honors the hell out of the original, yet making it its own thing. Laurie Strode is a badass. The gore in this movie is awesome. I think the characters are really fucking enjoyable, and actually, like, I buy into it. I like this movie a ton. The score is good. I just used it in a short that I'm uploading, that I just recently uploaded. Go check that out if you haven't seen it. I love the just cinematography. I love the violence. I love the acting. This movie is good. This is a really good movie that is the best sequel to the original Halloween, and I think this movie doesn't get enough praise. I know people who don't like this movie, and I sit here and go, how can't you like it? Laurie Strode in this movie is an absolute badass, building a house dedicated to just simply fucking killing Michael Myers and trapping him so that way you can burn him inside the house. So good. And the teaser for Halloween Kills, where she's yelling, "Let him burn," to the fire department as they're like driving past her, I'm like, that is amazing. These are guys that love these characters and clearly want to see all the drama play out on screen, and I fucking love this movie. This is one of my favorite movies from 2018. Check out my top 10 movies of 2018 to see what I mean. And guys, Halloween is a fantastic sequel to an already great movie. Therefore, I'm gonna go ahead and give Halloween 2018 9.5 out of 10. Why only 9.5 and not 10? There's one tiny thing about this movie that I do not like necessarily. It has something to do with the character of Dr. Sartain. I understand his character's motivations, and I understand what the big deal is with him. I just don't like the fact that he put on the Michael Myers mask. Outside of that one moment where he puts on the mask and he just looks fucking stupid in it, I think this movie overall is really good, and I think it's a great way to end off this series. But we're getting Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, and hopefully those 2 movies are good. As long as they're in the same hands as this movie, I think that we will have some really good movies.
Well, there you go. I've reviewed all 11 Halloween movies, and must I say, I'm looking forward to the next one coming out next year. I love a good chunk of these movies, and they hold a very special place in my heart. As I sit here talking about these movies, I begin to think about how the rocky relationship between good and bad amongst these movies is somewhat representative of the horror genre as a whole. With so many different horror movies, horror franchises, and installments in said franchises, not all can be good and not all can be terrible. With how vast the horror genre is, they reign a domain over cinema that is unprecedented due to the impact of the genre as a whole. Horror has been around since the earliest days of film, with a film from 1897 kicking off the genre on the silver screen. From German expressionists to American found footage movies to Spanish gore movies to Japanese supernatural thrillers, horror is a subjective genre because some of us like to be scared and others don't. To sum it up briefly, we all deal with what people call is the rush, which is due to our fight or flight responses whenever we get into danger or are faced with a stressful situation. Watch this video from the Nunicantv Fall Extravaganza for more information on this idea, timestamp in the link. Another way horror is subjective is in what actually scares us. Some of us are more scared and tense up when faced with real situations that life has thrown at us or when the horror is realistic, while others, like me, are more scared of the supernatural and the things that I can't control. Often is the case with horror movies, in that we tend to be more scared of what we think about the movie rather than what was actually in it. We aren't afraid of the little girl from The Exorcist rising up from her bed. We are afraid of her standing in the corner of our room as we try to sleep, where she's waiting to do something to us. We aren't afraid of the Halloween theme. We are afraid of what the theme entails, which is the feeling of being stalked by a mass serial killer who doesn't speak but just watches and follows you until you meet your doom. With the horror genre, there are dozens upon dozens of genres for people to choose from. Splatter, slasher, psychological, zombie, vampire, realistic, supernatural, giallo, mockumentary, and so many more. There's something for everyone in this genre, hence why the horror genre is my favorite genre of movie. The feeling I get from watching these movies isn't just a scared feeling, but rather an appreciation of the craft. The lighting, the scores, the violence, the characters, the out-of-this-world plots. I love horror movies and you should too. The only thing to fear is fear itself, said FDR during a speech about the Great Depression. But you know what? I think it's okay to be afraid of other things and people. It's what allows us to be able to react when we need to in times of dangers and fright. Maybe that's just it. Horror may not just be something that we want, maybe we don't just simply want the horror movies. Horror movies may in fact provide a greater role than any of us may have ever thought. It just may be that horror is something that we all may need.